Hello everyone. Today we will see next topic in this chapter, that is task communication. So whenever we see in a multitasking system, multiple tasks or processes run concurrently. That means more than one task or process will be running parallelly, and each process may or may not interact between them. Okay, that means there might be some interaction between the processes, or sometimes there will not be any interaction. So based on the degree of the interaction between the processes are classified into two types. One is cooperating processes, the other one is called competing processes. The cooperating processes are those which interact with each other, and one process requires the inputs from other process to complete its execution. So that means they share some information among them, right? So there is a communication that is required. That is, one process requires some inputs from other process to complete its execution. It will be waiting for other process to complete, then the output of that will be given to the other, it given to that process, and based on that it will do some operation. So there will be some sharing of some data between the two or more processes. Those are called cooperating processes. In competing processes, there is nothing shared in between. So, but the processes compete among themselves for the system resources. Okay, the competing processors do not share anything among themselves, but they share the system resources. The competing processors compete for the system resources, like some file, display device, okay, etc. Like same file, if it is shared between two different processors, they'll be competing as to who has to use that file or who has to access that particular file. If there is a same display device, like maybe a monitor or sometimes a printer, if it is shared between processes, each process will be competing among each other to acquire the access to that particular device. So they are called competing process. They don't share any data, but they share some system resources. Okay, so in cooperating processes we need task communication. Okay, in task communication, sorry, in cooperating processes, the information is exchanged, and the communication is done through two different methods. One is called cooperation through sharing, the other one is called cooperation through communication. Okay, one is cooperation through sharing, the cooperating process exchange the data through some shared resources, and the other one is cooperation through communication. So no data is shared, but they communicate for synchronization. uh, there is some synchronization between the processes, but not actually data is not shared yet, but some synchronization signals are shared. The mechanism through which the processes or tasks communicate with each other is known as inter-process or inter-task communication. So the communication is between two or more different processes. That is called inter-process or inter-task communication. In short, we call them IPC. So this IPC or inter-process communication is essential for process coordination. There are different types of mechanisms for IPC, and they are all dependent on the kernel or the operating system which we are using. Some of the important mechanisms that we are going to see are shared memory, message passing, and remote procedure call and sockets. In shared memory, again, there are different types, like we use pipes or we use memory mapped objects. In message passing, again, we have message queues, mailboxes, and signaling. Okay, so we will see each of them. First kind of inter-process communication mechanism is the shared memory. In shared memory, the processors share some area of the memory to communicate among them. So you can see in this figure, there are two processors, process 1 and process 2, and there is a shared memory between them. Okay, so this is called the shared memory. The same memory is used by process 1 as well as process 2. Okay, if the process 1, it wants to communicate with process 2, it will put that data in the shared memory, and process 2 can access that data from the shared memory. Similarly, if process 2 wants to send something to process 1, it will put that in this memory. Process 1 can access that from this memory. Okay, the information to be communicated by the process is written to the shared memory area. The other processes which require this information can read the same from the shared memory area. Okay, again, to implement this shared memory concept, there are different mechanisms. One is called pipes, other one is called memory mapped objects. So we will see the first one, that is pipes. A pipe is a section of the shared memory used by processors for communicating. So these pipes they follow the client server architecture. Okay, client means the process which connects to a pipe is known as pipe client, and the process which creates a pipe is known as the pipe server. The process which creates the pipe is pipe server. So it will create the pipe and it will put the data into it, and the process which connects to a pipe is the pipe client. The client will get the information that is given by the server, which is there in the pipe. A pipe can be considered as a conduit for information flow, just like a pipe, which is used to full of water. Here, the information is flowing in the pipe, and it has got two conceptual ends. The pipe, based on the information flow, it can be either unidirectional or bidirectional. Unidirectional means it allows information flow only in one direction, whereas bidirectional means it allows information flow in both the directions. So this is a concept of pipe, and this is actually a unidirectional pipe where the information flow is only in one direction, as you can see. That means there is a process 1 and process 2. Process 1 is writing into the pipe. So this is going to write into this pipe, and process 2 is reading from the pipe. So that means process 1 is sending some information to process 2 through this pipe. Okay, a unidirectional pipe allows the process connecting at one end of the pipe to write to the pipe, and the process connected at the other end of the pipe to read the data. Okay, so that is, this example is a unidirectional pipe. Whereas if it was a bidirectional pipe, it allows both reading and writing at one end. If it was a bidirectional, process 2 could also write and process 1 could read. Okay, then it could be bidirectional. But this figure, it shows a unidirectional pipe. And here you have written named and unnamed pipe. There are actually two different types again. The pipe can be a named pipe, or it can be anonymous or unnamed pipe. Okay, so that is what the implementation of pipe. Again, it is kernel dependent or OS dependent. Microsoft Windows operating system, it supports two types of pipes. One is anonymous pipes, or we can also call them unnamed, or which do not have names, and named pipes. Anonymous pipes are unnamed. They are unidirectional pipes which are used for data transfer between two processes. Whereas named pipes, they have a name given to them or an ID. Okay, they are unidirectional or bidirectional pipe for data exchange between processes. If it is bidirectional, there can be exchange of data in both the directions. So like anonymous pipes, the process which creates the named pipe is known as the server, that is pipe server, and process which connects to the named pipe is known as the pipe client. With the named pipes, any process can act as both client and server, allowing point-to-point communication. So any process, it can be either client or server. It can be both when it is a named pipe. So these named pipes, it can be used for communicating between processes running on the same machine, or between processors running on different machines connected to a network, because they have a name. By using that name, you can trace on which machine that process is located, if it is located on the same network. That's why it is possible to communicate if the processors run on the same machine, or even if they run on the different machines, provided they are connected through a proper network. Okay, so that's the concept of pipes. Next kind of shared memory concept is memory mapped objects. In memory mapped object, it is a shared memory technique adopted by certain real-time operating systems for allocating a shared block of memory which can be accessed by multiple processes simultaneously. So here what happens is, in the memory of the system, certain part is shared. Okay, that part is common for all the processes which access that shared memory. So that particular part of the memory is mapped with the virtual memory. Okay, so in this approach, a mapping object is created and physical storage for it is reserved and committed. So physical storage means the actual part in the memory block. Okay, so a process can map the entire committed physical area or a block of it to its virtual address space. So each process will have its own virtual address space. So to this virtual address space, the physical area or block of the memory is mapped. Okay, so that's why it's called memory mapping. So whenever you want to read or write, you're actually doing it from the virtual address space, and they are in turn mapped to the physical address space in the memory system. So all read and write operation to this virtual address space by a process is directed to its committed physical area, and that is through the mapping. Any process which wants to share data with other processes can map the physical memory area of the mapped object to its virtual memory space and use it for sharing the data. Okay, so that means here some part of the memory is mapped with the virtual memory space of the object, of the process. So if at all you want to read or write the data, you do that by mapping your virtual memory space to the physical memory space. Okay, so this is called concept of memory mapped objects. So these two, pipes and memory mapped objects, they come under the shared memory concept or shared memory mechanism of task communication. The next type we have seen is message passing. Okay. Message passing, it is a synchronous or asynchronous information exchange mechanism used for IPC, that is inter-process or inter-thread communication. The major difference between shared memory and message passing is that through shared memory, we can share a lot of data, whereas through message passing, we can share only a limited amount of data. Also, this message passing is relatively faster and free from the synchronization overheads as compared to shared memory. Okay, that is the advantage actually. Based on the message passing, again, there are different types. One is message queue, the other one is a mailbox, and the other one is signaling. First one, we will see message queue. So all these things, in brief, we have also studied in the subject of operating systems. So here we will again revise them. Message queue, it is a first in, first out queue. It is a queue, in the memory, you are putting it some messages in a queue, which stores the messages temporarily in a system defined memory object to pass it to the desired process. Temporarily, it will be stored in this queue, and from there, it will be passing to the process to where you want to send that particular message. Usually, the process which wants to talk to another process posts the message to the message queue. Okay, the messages are sent and received through send and receive methods. These are called send and receive methods. The send, it is like a command here. Send, in the brackets, the parameters are the name of the process to which the message is to be sent, followed by the message that has to be sent. This is the syntax. Send is the command. Then in the brackets, you will have the name of the process to which the message has to be sent. Then the message that has to be sent. Okay. Then receive, that is also a method wherein the command is like receive. In the brackets, you'll be having name of the process from which the message is to be received, followed by the message that has to be received. Okay, this is the way you perform that send and receive operations. Again, the implementation of this message queue and send and receive methods are dependent on your kernel or the operating system that you're going to use. This is a concept for message queue for indirect messaging. Indirect in the sense not process one and process two, they are not directly communicating. You're having a queue in between. Process one wants to send a message to process two. It will post that message to message queue, and process two will receive that message from the message queue. So this is the representation of the concept of message queue. Okay, whichever process wants to send a message, it will send it to the queue. From the queue, it is received by the process two. If you take an example of a Windows XP operating system, it maintains a single system message queue and one process or thread specific message queue. Okay. System message queue and one process or thread specific message queue. A thread which wants to communicate with another thread posts the message to the system message queue. Then the kernel, it picks up the message from the system message queue one at a time. Means there'll be queue means there'll be many messages which are queued up. The kernel will pick up one of them and examines the message for finding the destination, right? So you should know where it has to be sent. It is there in the send method. That gives the destination thread and then posts the message to the message queue of the corresponding thread. Corresponding thread means where it has to be delivered. So there will be a thread specific message queue separately. From system message queue, it will be moved on to the thread specific message queue. Okay. The messaging mechanism, it is again classified into two different categories based on the behavior of the message posting thread. It can be either synchronous or asynchronous messaging. In asynchronous messaging, the message posting thread, it just posts the message to the queue. Okay, if it wants to send, it will just post it to the queue, and it will not wait for an acceptance from the thread to which the message is posted. So there is no signal received from the recipient thread or acceptance received from the thread to which the message is posted. That is called asynchronous messaging. In synchronous messaging, the thread which posts a message enters a waiting state and waits for the message result from the thread to which the message is posted. That means here it expects something in return. Once it sends a message, it has to get back a signal or indication that the message has been received. Otherwise, it will be in the wait state. It will be in the waiting state till it receives a confirmation that the message has been delivered. The thread which invoked the send message becomes blocked. Okay, it will be blocked, and the scheduler will not pick it for scheduling because it is in the waiting state or it is blocked state. It is not in the ready state, right? In only the ready state processes will be picked up for scheduling. So here it will be in waiting or blocked state. So till it receives a confirmation that the message has been received from the recipient thread, it will be in that state, and it cannot be scheduled by the scheduler. Okay, these are the two mechanisms like asynchronous and synchronous messaging in messaging. Next concept of message passing is mailbox. Mailbox is similar to message queue, and this is also used in RTOS for inter-process communication, usually for one-way message. Okay, here the task or thread which wants to send a message to other tasks or threads, they create a mailbox for posting the messages. So element called mailbox is created, okay, by the process which wants to send a message. The threads which are interested in receiving the messages posted to the mailbox by this mailbox creator, uh, they can subscribe to the mailbox. Okay, so they can subscribe to the mailbox. So if they subscribe to the mailbox, whatever is there in the mailbox, they will be receiving. The thread which creates the mailbox is known as mailbox server, and the threads which subscribe to the mailbox are known as mailbox clients. The mailbox server posts messages to the mailbox and notifies it to the clients which are subscribed to the mailbox. The clients, they read the message from the mailbox on receiving the notification. So this is the concept of a mailbox. Here task one is the server. Actually it will create the mailbox and post its message to the mailbox. Here you can see it is a one-way communication. Task one will post the message to the mailbox. This mailbox will broadcast the message to whichever the tasks or the processes which have subscribed to this mailbox. Okay, if there is any other process which subscribes to this mailbox, it will also receive that message. It will broadcast it. Okay, from task one it has received it, and it will broadcast it to whichever processes have subscribed to this particular mailbox. So this is an indication of a mailbox. Here again, the mailbox creation, subscription, message reading and writing, they're all achieved through OS kernel provided API calls. Okay. Uh, as I said in the beginning, mailbox and message queues, they are similar in functionality. The only difference is the number of messages that is supported by them. So both of them are used for passing data in the form of messages from a task to another task. Mailbox is used for exchanging a single message between two tasks, or between an interrupt service routine and a task normally. So this mailbox, it associates a pointer pointing to the mailbox and a wait list to hold the tasks waiting for a message to appear in the mailbox. Okay, so that means the tasks waiting for a message to appear in the mailbox means they are the subscribers of that mailbox. Okay, so to hold the list of those tasks, there will be a waiting list created. So once the mailbox appears, the message will be passed to all these waiting tasks. Okay, so that is the mechanism of a mailbox. Next kind of message passing technique is signaling. In signaling, you're not actually sending any data, but you are sending some signals. Okay, so signaling is a primitive way of communication between processes or threads. So they are used for asynchronous notifications, where one process or thread fires a signal indicating the occurrence of a scenario with which the other process or threads are waiting. So the signals are not queued and they do not carry any data. Okay, so that means something like some IO, one process, if it is waiting for some IO operation. Okay, In that case, if there is another process which is utilizing that IO, once that IO operation is completed, suppose it is utilizing a printer, if you say, process 1 is utilizing a printer. Process 2 wants access to the printer, but that printer is occupied by process 1. Once the process 1 finishes that printing operation, it will send a signal, okay, that it has finished its operation. That is called signaling. So once process 2 receives that signal, process 2 can utilize the printer. Okay, so here no data is sent or no data is shared between process 1 and process 2, but some signal is shared as some communication. Okay, the communication mechanisms in some OS operations like RTX 51 Tiny OS, that is one operating system, or the inter-process communication in VxWorks operating system kernel. So these are all examples for signaling. Okay, so these three, message queue, mailbox, and signaling, these come under message passing mechanism of inter-process communication. The next and the last part in task communication is remote procedure call, or RPC, and sockets. So as the name itself indicates, remote procedure call, in the sense, what do you mean by a procedure? Procedure means it is a part of a program, or a small program, or a function, you can say, which is called whenever required. And that program normally, or procedure, will be normally in the same process. Whereas the remote procedure call, in the sense that procedure, it lies in some other process. It is a remote process, remote procedure. Remote procedure in the sense, the procedure which you are going to call does not lie in the same process, but it is lying in some other process. From that process, you are going to call this procedure. Okay, so remote procedure call is the inter-process communication mechanism used by a process to call a procedure of another process running on the same CPU or on a different CPU, which is interconnected in a network. Now we say that procedure resides in another process, and that process again, it can be in the same CPU as you are functioning, or it can also be on a different CPU if it is interconnected through a network. Okay, in the object-oriented language, RPC, or remote procedure call, is also known as remote invocation or remote method invocation, RMI. So it is mainly used for distributed applications like client server applications. So with this remote procedure call, it is possible to communicate over a heterogeneous network. What do you mean by heterogeneous network is, it is where the client and server applications are running on different operating systems. They do not belong to the same kind of operating system. The client is running on one operating system, server is running on different operating system. Even there, RPC is possible. The CPU or process obtaining the procedure which needs to be invoked remotely is known as server. Okay, the process which contains the procedure is known as server. The CPU or process which initiates an RPC request, that means the process which calls that procedure, that is called a client. The process which has the procedure is called server. The process which calls the procedure is called the client. So this is indication or the concept of remote procedure call, wherein we can see there are two different scenarios. In first one, the processes are running on different CPUs, but they are connected through a network. Okay, this is process which wants to call another process belonging to another CPU, another processor. Here, this process wants to call this procedure, but it is in another CPU. The connection is established via the network through socket. So you will see what socket is. And that network, it is governed by some protocols. We have studied this in CCN, I hope. TCP/IP protocol, that is, or UDP, right? Then you have the processors running on the same CPU. Here they are on the different CPU. They are connected via a network. Here they are on the same CPU. There are two processors, process 1 and process 2. Process 1 is the client actually, and process 2 is the server. Here also, this process on this CPU is the client. This process is the this process or this CPU is the server, because it holds the procedure, and they are connected over the network. They are in the same CPU, but still there is some connection over the socket, TCP IP or UDP. You know this, right? TCP IP, transmission control protocol or internet protocol suite, or user datagram protocol. We have studied these protocols. So either of them, they can be used to establish the connection. Okay, it can be on the same CPU or they can be on the different CPUs. It is possible to implement the RPC communication with different interfaces. Okay, so there is a language called interface definition language, which defines the interfaces for this remote procedure call. In case of Microsoft, that uh, interface definition language is Microsoft Interface Definition Language, MIDL. It is the ideal implementation from Microsoft for all Microsoft platforms. The RPC, again, it can be either synchronous or asynchronous. Synchronous communication is also called blocking. Asynchronous is also called non-blocking. Why it is called blocking is, as you have seen in the previous case, if it is synchronous, it will be waiting till it receives the signal, I mean, the confirmation that it has been delivered, right? Okay, in the synchronous communication, the process which calls the remote procedure is blocked until it receives a response back from the other process. That's why it's called a blocking communication. In asynchronous, the calling process continues its execution while the remote process performs the execution of the procedure. The result from the remote procedure is returned back to the caller through mechanisms like callback functions. Okay, so this is about RPC. On security front, this RPC employs authentication mechanisms to protect the systems against vulnerabilities. Okay, the client application should authenticate themselves with the server to get the access. There will be some passwords kind of thing. Okay, authentication mechanisms like IDs and passwords, public key cryptography like DES, 3DES algorithms, they are used by the client for authentication. So these are some cryptography techniques. Without authentication, any client can access the remote procedure, which might lead to potential security risks. Okay, so that is what happens whenever you have remote access. So to implement this RPC, we use something called sockets. Sockets. So it's a logical endpoint in a two-way communication link between two applications running on a network. A port number is associated with the socket. Each socket will have a port number so that the network layer of the communication channel can deliver the data to the designated application. Okay. So through this port number, you are actually achieving that communication on the particular network. The sockets are of different types again, like they're called internet sockets, INET, or Unix sockets, etc. INET socket works on internet communication protocol. That's why we have used TCP/IP or UDP for communication protocols. So these INET sockets, again, they are classified into two types: stream sockets and datagram sockets. Okay, stream sockets, they are connection oriented and they use TCP/IP to establish a reliable connection. Datagram sockets, they rely on UDP, user datagram protocol, for establishing a connection. The UDP is unreliable as compared to your TCP. Okay, stream sockets use TCP, datagram sockets use UDP. The client server communication model uses a socket at the client side and a socket at the server side. A port number is assigned to both of these, I mean to the client side and also server side, and the client and server should be aware of port number associated with the socket. In order to start the communication, the client needs to send a connection request to the server. The client socket will send a connection request to the server at the specified port number. The client should be aware of the name of the server also along with the port number. Then the server always listens to the specified port number on the network. Upon receiving a connection request from the client will send a request, right? Upon receiving that request from the client, based on the success of authentication, there'll be some authentication mechanism. If it is successful, then the server grants the connection request and a communication channel is established between the client and the server. Okay, so this is a way we implement the remote procedure call, and that's why this thing is called a socket. The client, it uses the host name and port number of the server for sending requests, and server uses the client's name and port number of the client for sending responses. Okay, so both of them should be aware of each other's port number. Client uses host name and port number of the server for sending the requests to establish the connection. So once the connection is established, the server uses the client's name and the port number of the client for sending the responses. So if the client and server, they both are running on the same CPU, both can use the same host name because the host is the same CPU and port number for communication. The physical communication link between the client and the server is established using Ethernet or Wi-Fi, because it's a network, right? We use Ethernet, that is the LAN cable, or it is, if it is wireless, through Wi-Fi, the communication is established. The underlying implementation of socket is again OS or the kernel dependent. There are different types of OSs, and each of the OSs provide different socket interfaces. Okay, so in detail, it's not required. Like different types of OS, they provide different types of socket interfaces. There's much of the information available in the textbook. If you're interested to know more, you can always refer the textbook. But from examination point of view, this particular thing is enough. That means you are going to, we have seen what are the different types of processors. They can be on different CPUs or they can be on the same CPU. Then regarding IDL, then about the security thing, then using sockets, how the sockets are used, which types of sockets, and how the client and server mechanism works here, how the connection is established, and how the message is passed through this remote procedure call. Okay, so that's all for today. So today we have seen one important concept of embedded systems, that is task communication, and in that there are three types: shared memory, message passing, remote procedure call, and sockets. Okay, we will stop today. We'll stop for today. In the next class, we will see another important topic, that is task synchronization.